Hi everyone, welcome to today's video session. In today's video, we'll see how Terraform works and how we can use Terraform to spin up our infrastructure resources. Now, basically, let's understand what is Terraform. Now, Terraform is infrastructure as a code. It's an infrastructure as a service, right, which it provides. And it allows you to automate and manage your infrastructure, your platform, and the services on that platform very seamlessly. It is open source and it is declarative. So what is declarative means is you don't have to define every step and specify what needs to be done. But however, what you can do is just tell the Terraform that this is your final result or this is the end state that you want, and Terraform will do it for you. Versus in the imperative style, you have to actually specify each and every step, what and how it needs to be done or executed. So in short, Terraform is a tool that will help you provision your infrastructure on various multiple providers. Let's assume that you are working on a project and you want to create an application. Now you want to set up an infra from scratch to run your application. How does your infra look like? What is the configuration? Let's say you want to spin up 5 to 6 servers and you want to deploy your applications, which is nothing but your microservices, which make up your entire application through Docker containers, right? In the form of Docker containers. Then also you need a database container. So you decide that you will use AWS as your provider to build this whole infrastructure. First step that you are going to do is first you will go to AWS console, then you will prepare this setup. Then you will start creating an EC2 server instance. You will give some names. You will install Dockers in each of these EC2 instances that you are creating. Then what you will do is you will create security on the servers. You will create and set up some firewalls. You will set up network, etc., etc. Right? Once your infra is ready and prepared, you only then you will be able to deploy your images, Docker images on these containers on the infra. Right? In future, you may also want to make some adjustments in the configuration on your infra. These are all separate steps of creating the whole setup. So one part is provisioning of the infra and preparing everything for the apps to be deployed, and the second part is the deployment of the apps itself. Imagine in a large organization, it's not one person doing this everything. So you'll have separate teams managing and doing this. So you'll have one team that will provision the infrastructure. You'll have second team that will configure them. You will have third team that will develop the apps. You will have another team that will deploy the apps. So there are going to be multiple stages where each team or each of these team are going to function in sequence. Now Terraform is used for the first part, that is provisioning of the infrastructure. That's where Terraform comes into play. And once the infra is provisioned, only then you can prepare it for deployment of application further. And we'll see in this video how we create VPCs. I'll demonstrate how to create the virtual network, subnets, securities, roles, etc. Right? Now, all of these needs to be done in a very sequential manner because there may be dependency on each of these tasks. You cannot deploy anything without your EC2 instance server being, provisioned. So there are certain dependencies that are there, and we have to be mindful of those. Now, when I was on the Terraform, so if you go to terraform.io website, you will see all these details that I'm telling you, explaining you in this video. You will find all of these details over here. So I'm not actually explaining anything new or out of this. So you'll find all the material that I'm actually showing you in this video available onto this terraform.io website. However, one thing that I came across was a very good part was there are many questions or differences between what is it that Terraform does versus what is it that Ansible does. Okay. Now Ansible, as per the official documentation which I was reading, does the same thing. Sounds like it does the same thing, right? So what is the difference? And that is what we need to also understand. And which is the one that we should be actually using if I have to deliver my project, right? Now both are used for infrastructure as a code to automate provisioning, configuring, and managing. However, Terraform is primarily used for infrastructure provisioning. It is a tool which is its main power. That's what it is used for. And it also has other possibilities where you can seamlessly deploy it on other tools on the infra as well, right? Using other tools on different infra. Now, Ansible is mainly used for configuration. That is the primary key part that Ansible comes in. And that is only done once your infra is provisioned. Then you can use Ansible to deploy and configure the applications on those infra that has been provisioned. There are some overlaps, but there is a very clear line between what these two tools are used for. And the major difference is, to summarize in short, Terraform is a tool used for provisioning the infra, and Ansible is a tool which is better used and consumed for configuring and deploying the applications on the infra that is provisioned. So you can use Ansible on top of your Terraform, right? You can use both combination of these, or you can use different tools on top of Terraform. It's up to you, right? How Terraform works, I'm not going to go into detail, but I'll give you a very high level understanding of how Terraform works. For more detail, you can refer to this website, which you can see over here on the screen right now. So Terraform's main components is, one is the core and the other is the provider. Core is split into two parts. It has two aspects within the core. The one part that you is the writing the code that you write or you define, the set of instructions in the form of templates. That itself, that configuration file itself, and the second file is the current state of your infrastructure. So if you would have executed a previous Terraform code, it maintains a current state of your infra, and that state is also defined and maintained within the code. So what core does is, it will try to read your configuration file and will compare this configuration file with your current state. And then it will try to see the configuration file that you are asking Terraform to execute. Is it matching with the current state, or it is different from your current state, and the config file is what your desired state needs to be. That is what your final state needs to be, right? And then once Terraform identifies that, it will read your plan, and based on that plan, it will try to connect to the providers. And these providers could be anything, any cloud component providers like AWS, Google, etc. Now, once it connects to the provider, there are hundreds of providers that are registered with Terraform, and Terraform connects to these providers through API. There are API services through which Terraform helps to connect to these providers, and these providers have various resources. Under that resources, under these providers, we are able to use multiple resource types that we want to provision for our infrastructure. And that's how net the architecture of Terraform is. Now, how it is useful. Tomorrow, imagine if you want to modify or make adjustment in any of the components on your infrastructure that you have provisioned already. Like I said, the core is made up of two parts. One is your desired state that you write, and the second is the current state, which is already there. And Terraform core does that management for you. You don't have to bother or worry about it. So that's what I meant about declarative and imperative. So Terraform is declarative. You just tell what is your desired state should be. Rather than telling each and every instruction step by step, I want this, I want to remove two servers, and I want to remove two roles, I want to add one more role. Instead of doing this step by step, you just declare, I want 7 servers, I want these roles, and I want this much grants, and that's it. And Terraform will do it for you. So you don't have to bother about anything. And the beauty of this is, you can test this in your dev environment. You can create all these resources and apps in your dev environment, and you can exactly use the same copy and replicate into your production without making any changes to it. That fast and that easy Terraform is. So let's proceed with the video, and I'll show you how it works. This is basically the website, terraform.io. They provide the entire documentation. We'll go to docs. Under docs, we can use the provider use. You'll go to provider use. In that, you will see what providers does. So they provide two things. One is the resource types, and other is data source. Data source you will use only when you want to fetch something from other resources. And if you want to create resources, then you'll have to go to resource types. So that's basically the difference. Now, there is a documentation available which explains in detail what exactly all this means. There are also videos available where you can actually try Terraform hands-on using these tutorials. I've tried to show same thing in this one video, that I'm creating right now. However, you can feel free and choose to go on this Terraform site and have a look on what each of these two tutorials actually are. They go much more into detail. However, I'm trying to explain and give an overview of how Terraform works. If you want to do basic setup, how you can write that infrastructure in the form of a code using Terraform, how to install, build, change, and destroy is very important aspect where you can destroy the infrastructure using the same code. Right? Whatever you have created, it will everything will get reversed. So you don't have to worry about it because this is very important because it attracts cost if you leave the resources running. So this is a quick tutorial available. It's very much in detail. So let's start. In this example, I'm going to use Amazon Web Service as our example to build our infrastructure. The installation, the first thing as prerequisite that I'll need is the Terraform CLI itself. I have Mac, so I'll go with the steps provided for Mac. You can, if you have Windows, you can choose to go for Windows. Steps are very easy. You can just refer to this site instructions and you can install Terraform. Once you are done, the next thing that you will need is the AWS CLI. Now, why I need this AWS CLI? This is the command line interface provided by AWS. I'm going to execute this code on my local machine from my local Mac and connect to the AWS infrastructure. To do that, I'll need to execute certain AWS commands, and for those commands to run, I need a command line interface installed, and that's why I need this AWS CLI. It's very easy to install. You can refer to the documentation. I'll just show you. You can just run pip3 command to install pip3 install AWS CLI. If you don't have pip3 installed, please refer to the Python documentation. Again, it's very easy to install. I already have it, so it shows requirement satisfied. So let's start and let's see how we can write a code. I'm using Visual Studio Code for this demonstration. You can choose any editor. I have a folder created. I'll quickly open that project folder. Now, I'll create the file main.tf. In main.tf, this is where, so we'll create certain set of files and each of these files will have some purpose to serve. What this main does, basically, let's understand that. So in main, like I said, Terraform will help you connect to various providers. Each of these providers have different resource types. We can use these different resource types, and those resource types under these providers needs to be maintained or mentioned somewhere. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to tell Terraform which provider you want to connect to. And that exactly is what I'm going to do here in my main.tf. Okay, so let's start. I'm referring to the documentation on terraform.io, which I had shown you. From there, I'm going to use this command. So the first command is provider, and the provider name in our case is AWS. Very simple. The next is we'll have to set the profile. Now, what is profile? We had installed AWS CLI. Okay, and this AWS CLI requires certain profile to be configured. Because if you just tell provider as AWS, the system does not understand where and how to connect. So you need to create and configure some profile, and you'll have to give some name to that profile. Now, how will you configure this profile? We need to see that first. So I'll show you how we create and configure a profile from our command line interface. Okay, and for that first you need to create your AWS account on the AWS console itself, and then you'll have to create a user, and that user will have some access ID and access key which you will need for configuration purpose. The command that I need to use is AWS configure. I'm just trying to see if I have any existing configurations. So AWS configure and the list. So I already have a profile created, and you see there is a profile with access key and secret key. This is what I was referring to. And then we have region US East 1. Access key and secret key is something that should be confidential. You should not be sharing this. It should be stored safely into any vault, or maybe you decrypt it, encrypt it, and keep it somewhere safely. But make sure this is not publicly available to anyone. Otherwise, it can be very easily misused. Because through these access key and secret key, they can access the instances and then can do anything if the roles and permissions are granted. So make sure your access key and secret key is uh, stored safely. I'm going to show you how to create this. However, once I create this, I'll show you the access key and secret key, but I'll delete it. I'm just showing it and creating for the demonstration purpose. And the command that we are going to use is AWS configure profile and the profile name. Okay, so this should be this could be any name that you want to choose. You can give any name you want. I've already set up. And when you create this configuration, when you fire this command, it will create two files, config and credentials. And both of these files will have your profile that has been stored. You can either use this command or you can create these files manually and in that structure, and you can copy it over here. That you can choose to do that way also, or you can use the command to configure those files manually. I'll have to sudo because these are hidden folders. I'll sudo into the directory. So there's a .aws directory where you will have these two files, config and credential. I'll type my password and then I'll do ls. Okay, ls will not work. I'll have to do sudo .aws. Okay, so these are the two files. These are hidden files, config and credentials. Now, if you want to see what is it in that, so you say cat.aws config. And this is what I was mentioning, right? So it has region, it has profile name. This is the profile name that I gave, right? And this is how this is what the configuration stores. You can manually edit this, and you can manually change the entries if you want, or you can use the command line interface to do that. These files will automatically get created. Region is very important. Please be careful of the region because your instances will be created under that region. If you are into another region and if you go and check, you will not be able to see those instances. So be very careful. So region is very, very important while you are creating a profile, because in that profile will only work for that region. And then let's see what is there in the credentials file. I'll remove this actually. I'll remove everything and I'll create a fresh file and I'll show you how I've configured this, right, for your benefit, so you'll be able to understand how the profile is created. Now let me go to AWS console. I'll sign in using my email ID, and we are going to sign in using the root user, not the IAM user. IAM user is what I'm going to create from the root. I'll put my password. There you go. So uh, I'll go to IAM, Identity Access Management. Now, if you see, this is my account, and in that is the security credentials. This is where your keys will be available. Or I'll just show you. Uh, I'll go to users and create a temporary user right now. I'll give a name demo purpose. Assign the access key. We need the access key. We don't need password. Attach policy. I'll give administrator rights. Next. Click next. Create. And this is what I was referring to. This is what access key and the secret keys. And this is something that needs to remain confidential, and you should not be sharing it to anyone. If anyone has access to these, they can very easily log into your instances or servers. All right. So now let's configure. I'll run AWS configure profile and the profile name, and I'll give a name demo pro. I'll copy that access ID which I just created. and then the secret key. The region name, I'll be using US East 1. Make sure the naming convention is correct. And the default output format, JSON. We are going to use JSON. You can use YAML. Terraform widely mostly uses JSON, so I'll use JSON. Now let's see ls.aws, and you see both these files are created again. So we had removed it earlier, now it is created. And we'll see the configuration. Yeah, there you go. So the profile name that we have given is Demo Pro. So this is how you will create your profile, and let's check what is there in credentials, and this is what you have in credentials. So make sure your credentials are stored safely into some vault or something, and should not be accessible publicly. Okay. So let's go ahead. I'll clear this, and I'm going to remove these files because I had shown this just for demo purpose. I'm going to remove these files. I'll also delete that user that I created. I'll create a separate user and I'll configure and I'll come back again.